So when my first daughter was born, I had a conversation with my wife about running for the school board because a seat had opened up in my area. The person who was representing us on the school board resigned to run for a different office. And I thought to myself, maybe this is somewhere where I can make a contribution. I now have a child of my own. I'm thinking about the future of our community. Let me try this out. Let me see if I can add some value to the school district. And I sat down with my wife, shared my thoughts with her, and she agreed to support me. So I decided to do it. I had a wonderful 4 years on the Miami-Dade County School Board. We improved school performance almost district-wide. We used to have 11 F high schools in Miami-Dade. We had none by the time I left the board. We were able to give teachers raises. We didn't lay off any teachers despite the tough economic times that we were living. So it was a wonderful experience, and I realized that I could be good at this and that I could do something to improve the quality of life in my community. Serving on the school board was very important because a lot of times leaders at the state and federal level pass policies and they don't really understand the effects of these policies and the ramifications at the local level. So having been a local elected official first on the school board helped me understand the maze of federal and state regulation, the challenges that it imposes on school districts like Miami-Dade and so many others throughout the country. So that experience serving at the local level, what some would call the ground level, certainly has made me a more informed, more effective member of Congress, because when I'm considering policies, I'm always thinking about how do they affect classrooms, students, teachers, parents, principals. And on the Education and Workforce Committee, of course, we're responsible for setting federal policy for K through 12 education. So I am very thankful for the time that I served on the school board and for all of the people, from my colleagues on the board to Superintendent Carvalho, who taught me so much. And of course, where I learned the most, which was by visiting schools like yours, talking to students, to teachers, to principals. So when thinking about foreign policy, we have to think first about what's best for the United States, because we're setting foreign policy for the United States and not for any other country. And I have some very serious concerns with what President Obama has done. If we think about it, the Cuban government held an American hostage for over 5 years, Mr. Alan Gross. He was held in a very cruel way, not for having committed any crimes, just because they arbitrarily decided to detain him and make him a hostage. And in exchange for the release of Mr. Gross, who should have never spent a single minute in a Cuban prison, the United States, under President Obama, has turned over 3 convicted spies to the Cuban government, one of who was convicted of conspiring to murder United States citizens. We have given them full diplomatic relations, some sanctions relief. In essence, all of this has been a reward to the Cuban government for conduct that we should never reward as a country. We can never send the message as a country that holding an American hostage is a good way to get what you want. So that's why I'm opposed to all of this. I think it's bad for U.S. national security interests. And what else are we getting in return? Nothing. The Cuban government has already stated and reiterated that it will change absolutely nothing with regards to their political system. So we know that the Cuban people are also going to be worse off. The United States has a very simple roadmap passed by Congress in 1996 for the normalization of relations with Cuba. Freedom for all political prisoners, the reestablishment of basic human rights, including freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and the call to free elections. Those are the 3 simple conditions that our policy dictates that Cuba needs to comply with in order to have normal relations with us. And I don't think that's a very high standard. Basic human rights, freedom for those who are imprisoned because of their political beliefs, and free elections. So the way for Cuba to earn full commercial relationship with the United States is already outlined in our policy. Unfortunately, the president has given the Cuban government everything they've asked for in exchange for very little. And that's not to say we're not happy that Mr. Gross was liberated, because it was a very sad tragedy that someone would spend over 5 years in jail for committing no crime. So we're happy that happened. However, in the context of our broader foreign policy, I think this was a big mistake. There's a lot of frustration throughout the country and back home in South Florida with regards to Congress and our government, really at all levels, because there seems to be a lot of bickering, a lot of posturing, and really elected leaders doing very little to work together to find solutions that will improve people's lives. So since I got here to DC, I've tried to make that better by getting to know not just my Republican colleagues, but also my Democratic colleagues. I've co-sponsored and introduced legislation with Democrats on areas where we agree. And that's the only way this is going to change. If people act courageously and meet in the middle and find common ground. Some people in American politics today attack compromise, but they forget that our own Constitution was the product of multiple compromises. So we should follow that example set by our founding fathers, those brilliant people who came up with the idea of American democracy, and work together. And then the voters also have to get involved and reward those that want to work with anyone who's willing to advance solutions that will improve the quality of life in our country. I'm a Republican. I have my set of principles, beliefs, but I'm willing to sit down with anyone who's willing to help me help my community and the country. So congratulations to all of the 7th graders at W.R. Thomas Middle in Kendall, in Florida's 26th Congressional District, which I'm fortunate to represent. You have finished the 2014-2015 school year, and next year you will be the big kids on campus. So congratulations to you. First thing I want to do is wish you a wonderful summer. Make sure you read something over the summer, but have a lot of fun, most importantly.